Welcome to Toon My Heart. Yes, that's Toon as in cartoon. Because in this podcast, we'll be taking a closer look at popular animated movies through a Christian lens, in search of faith-relevant themes and traces of eternal truth. I'm your host, Tracy Herold. And just a disclaimer, I'm not a Bible scholar, nor am I a film scholar. I'm just an animation fan who loves Jesus, and who wants to explore how the themes and ideas presented in some of my favorite films might resonate with the Christian faith and help remind us of what we believe, in sometimes surprising ways. So I hope you'll join me as we get animated about our faith. In June of 1934, Walt Disney made a very bold, and many thought very foolish, announcement to the New York Times that his studio, at that time best known for their 5 to 10 minute silly symphony shorts, was going to produce a full-length animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, contrary to popular belief, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was not technically the first animated feature film ever made. There are at least two that came before it. El Apostol, made in Argentina in 1917, and The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, made in Germany in 1926, both of which used stop-motion animation techniques. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, however, would be the first cel animated feature film, and the first animated feature film produced in the U.S. And it was certainly still a novel enough idea at the time that even those closest to Walt doubted his vision. Both his wife Lillian and his brother and business partner Roy tried to talk him out of it. Movie industry insiders referred to the plan as Disney's folly. His animators and other studio staff were excited by the idea. We'll learn more about that later from my guest. But they also had big concerns about the challenges of producing a full-length animated film and whether it would be able to hold the audience's attention. But Walt didn't let any of that deter him from moving ahead. As one of his 9 old men, Ward Kimball, related, he felt that if you had a solid story, not only laughs in it, but tragedy, it would go. It had taken a while for Walt to decide what that perfect story for his first full-length film would be, though. Along the way, he had considered Alice in Wonderland, Rip Van Winkle, Babes in Toyland, Bambi, The Iliad and the Odyssey, and Gulliver's Travels, some of which, of course, would go on to become Disney films later on. But for the first feature, he finally settled on Snow White, based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale and inspired by the 1916 silent version he had seen as a teenager. He selected a small unit of writers to develop the story before announcing it to the studio at large in October 1934. From that point on, all studio staff were encouraged to contribute to the story, with Walt offering $5 for every gag someone came up with. In the course of development, the team came up with more than 50 possible names for the dwarfs, including Hoppy, Wheezy, Big O Ego, Awful, Jumpy, Baldy, Hickey, Sniffy, Stuffy, Shorty, Burpy, Tubby, and Dizzy, before settling on the 7 that we know and love today. Can you imagine if Dopey was replaced with Burpy? Speaking of Dopey, he was originally intended to be a speaking character just like all of the other dwarfs. Mel Blanc of Looney Tunes fame even auditioned for the part. But when no voice seemed to perfectly fit the character, they came up with the idea to make him mute instead. Snow White's voice, on the other hand, was found with the very first person to audition, Adriana Caselotti. She had actually recommended herself for the part after overhearing a call between her father, a vocal coach, and Disney's casting director. Walt auditioned around 150 other actresses and singers after her, before finally deciding that the first really had been the best and offering her the part a full year after her audition. Disney's dream came at a steep cost. Despite predicting in that New York Times announcement that the film would cost around $250,000 to make, the budget ended up closer to almost $1.5 million, which was a huge amount for any movie at that time. Walt mortgaged his house to help finance the production, and then he still needed another $250,000 loan to finish the film. So he showed a rough cut to Joseph Rosenberg of Bank of America. At the end, Rosenberg approved the loan, saying, "Walt, that thing is going to make a hatful of money." And thankfully, Rosenberg was right. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles, California on December 21st, 1937, then went into general release in February 1938, and it proved to be a huge hit with both critics and audiences, earning more than $8 million, which made it the highest-grossing film of 1938 and the most successful sound film ever up to that point in time. In fact, thanks also to multiple re-releases over the years, Snow White remained the highest-grossing animated film of all time for 55 years, until Aladdin in 1993. And, adjusted for inflation, it is still one of the top 10 performers at the North American box office, and still the highest-grossing animated film with an adjusted gross of almost $2.3 billion. Walt went from having to mortgage his house to get Snow White made to being able to use the profits from the film to help finance a new $4.5 million studio in Burbank, which is still the site of Walt Disney Studios today. And of course, the studio began work on more of the feature films we all know and love all these years later. In 1939, Walt received an honorary Oscar for the film with a unique design consisting of one normal-sized plus 7 miniature Oscar statuettes. In 1987, Snow White herself became the first, and so far the only, Disney princess to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And in 1989, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs became one of the first 25 films ever selected for preservation in the National Film Registry for its cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. At the end of the day, Walt's vision and daring resulted in one of the most important and impactful films ever made, and still one of the most beautiful and affecting, in my opinion. Almost 90 years ago, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs sparked and shaped the animation industry, and the influence of its success and its artistry are still felt in that industry to this day. I know for a lot of you, myself included, your favorite part of the podcast is hearing from my daughter Darcy with her kid's eye view, synopsis, or thoughts on the films that we talk about. But Darcy is getting older now. She's 10 years old, and it's starting to not appeal to her as much participating in the podcast in that way. And I want to respect her autonomy on that. I certainly don't want to force her to do it. It's supposed to be a fun thing. She will probably still chime in with her thoughts from time to time, but on this particular film, she has chosen not to. So we're not going to hear from Darcy this time around. But I did want to start something new, which is I'm going to try to start sharing comments from some of my listeners more often. So I went on X, formerly Twitter, and asked for your thoughts on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So I'm going to go ahead and share the responses that I received. So starting off with @CookiesThin, she says, a beautifully animated film that still holds up today. My friends at Desert of the Real Podcast, that's @DesertofRealPod on X, said, you watch it and you are still blown away by the craftsmanship and attention to detail in this movie. Still one of the best of all time. And finally, @Intellectric, which is, of course, our friend Tim Ingle, the creator of Barely Biblical, who has been a guest on this podcast a couple of times and will probably be a guest again soon. He says, we could not make that film now if we tried. The technique and technology is gone. It would probably cost over $1 billion to produce it at the level it was produced. It blows my mind every time I watch it. Well said to everyone. Some great thoughts there. And if you would like to hear your handle shared on the podcast, or you want to share your thoughts on a topic that's coming up, please keep an eye on my Twitter feed, my X feed. And I will be posting questions there periodically for you to chime in on. So thanks again to those listeners for sharing their thoughts, and let's move on to my guest to hear his thoughts on Snow White and Walt Disney. My guest today is Dr. William Brunson, and he is the author of a new book titled Faith, Leadership, and Walt. Dr. Brunson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm really glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and also about this book.
Well, I am the pastor of a church in the Birmingham, Alabama area, and we're about 3,400 members, and it's a really exciting place to be. But I'm also a John Maxwell certified teacher, trainer, and coach, and so I enjoy that. And then I've always been a really big Disney fan, watching the movies, going to the parks, and everything about Disney. I've done training with the Disney Institute along the way. And so I started looking at the different aspects of life and my faith and my love of Disney, and started seeing in a lot of the Disney movies and the Disney sort of the Disney mindset, seeing things that I could directly link into, well, lessons of faith as well. And so that prompted me to go down the book route to write the book.
I love it. Right up my alley. I will definitely have to check that book out. So do you know when it's going to be available to purchase and where?
Yes, it's being published in partnership with the John Maxwell Publishing Company, and target date for it to be released is around the first couple weeks of March. And once it's available, it'll be available, of course, on the John Maxwell website, but also it'll be available through Amazon and other online booksellers as well.
Oh, very exciting. So what exactly is John Maxwell?
John Maxwell is one of the gurus of leadership in the world. I mean, I think he's about to publish his 93rd book on leadership.
Wow.
He grew up in a preacher's home. His dad was a pastor and a leader in their denomination, and actually a college president at one point. And John grew up in that environment and answered the call to ministry. He served about 5 churches along the way and grew them significantly under his leadership, but then realized that God was calling him to step out of that role and into the role of teaching and training leaders so that people could take their faith and put it to work in the business world and the church world and nonprofit world. And so he has been writing and speaking about leadership ever since. And so the John Maxwell Company is really amazing in the work it does in training speakers and coaches and other trainers as well to go out and to teach. But they also have, they got a nonprofit that's called Equip. And through Equip, they go into different parts of the world. They're invited in by governments of different countries. They went to Argentina last fall. They've been to Guatemala. They've been to several other countries where they're invited in by the president to hold what they call tables of transformation, where they teach faith-based value systems in those countries, because the leadership of the country realizes that if they can change the youth, if they can put values back into the youth of their country, then they can actually, in the long run, affect a change in their entire country. And so John Maxwell and his nonprofit Equip and volunteers that are coaches or work for John in one of the companies, those volunteers go in and they do amazing work in those different parts of the world. And their goal is not just to give the faith-based leadership techniques and all to the young people, but they also, at the end of that, they offer a lesson on, where all of that's rooted in the gospel and in the gospel story. And so they're excited every time they come back from one of those, and they're able to share the number of commitments to Christ that came through that.
Wow.
And even when the Maxwell organization meets for their International Maxwell Conference that they do twice a year, even in that, on one night of the conference, John will hold a faith-based service, and he always prefaces it by saying, look, if you're not a person of faith and have no interest in faith, and we're not compelling you to come to this, but we invite you to come and see what this is about. And so in that, he shares his heart, how God has worked in his life and through his life. And then he gives the offer and the invitation for people to come and to accept Christ. And every time he does it, they do.
Wow.
There'll be people that do. And he's actually, one of the books he's written it's called the John Maxwell Leadership Bible. And basically it is a version of the Bible where throughout the Bible, where we have other study Bibles with different study notes. In this one, he has leadership notes from the leadership style of Moses or the leadership style of Gideon. So he's able to draw from the leadership examples that are in there, which is a little bit like what I do in the book that I've written about faith and leadership in Walt Disney. Faith, leadership, and Walt, I'm drawing from people like Abraham and Nehemiah and talking about those biblical folks alongside the amazing things that Walt was able to do.
Very interesting. So just quickly, do you have like a favorite anecdote or lesson from the book that you could share with us?
For me, the greatest example from Walt is the vision casting example, because you don't question that Walt was a visionary.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't accomplish what he accomplished if you're not a visionary. But the greatest example of his vision casting related to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I mean, the fact that on a October night, he gave his animators 50 cents each and sent them out for a steak dinner. And I personally would like to go back to a time where I could go out to eat and get a steak dinner for 50 cents.
Yeah, if only.
I mean, that'd be awesome. But he sent them out for a steak dinner and told them, when you're through, come back to the sound stage. It's the mid-1930s, and they come back to the sound stage, and there's one light on the stage that's glowing, and there's Walt standing there. And he sits them all down, and then he tells them across about over 3 hours, he tells them the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He acts out every character. He throws his coat up over his head whenever he wants to be the wicked hag. I mean, he takes on and is the personality of every one of the dwarfs, including Dopey. He is every character in the story. And he does this and finishes. And the animators are just enamored by what he's done. And then he invites them to join him on what will be the beginning of a journey, as together they create the very first full-length animated film. And I mean, the vision casting where he got them to understand why they're going to make a full-length movie before he told them what, which was they were going to make a full-length movie. I mean, he shows them the why before he tells them what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. He gets them to buy in. And the animators, one of them said, we would have gone to war with him at that point because we would have done anything to make this movie.
Yeah.
It had to happen. And so his vision casting was truly, truly amazing.
Yeah. And, so many people doubted him along the way to making this film.
Oh, right. It was called Disney's Folly.
Yeah.
The press called it Disney Folly. And they said, they quoted some scientist, which you probably could put quotes around that, who declared that if you watched a full-length animated movie, you would go insane. That it would actually cause you to go insane if you watched it. And I'm like, gee, I mean, that's a little extreme.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a $500,000 budget for the movie. He ends up spending $1.5 million to make the movie because he had to do things like invent the multiplane camera so that he would have depth of action in the movie. He threw out so many scenes because they just did not rise to the caliber he wanted. And I mean, when it premiered in 1937, like I said, it cost $1.5 million. The live action movie that won the Oscar for Best Picture that year only cost $1.2 million.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, here we are, how many years later?
Yeah.
And we very much take it for granted that there are dozens of animated movies in the theater every year. Often they are some of the highest grossing films every year. and it's just commonplace. And we don't realize that if this had not been a success and if he had not had that vision to take this leap, we might not have animated movies today.
Right.
The industry might look very different. So, yeah, the things that he achieved in his life, as much as it was cut shorter than we would have liked, are amazing. He was just a very ambitious man, and I'm sure there's a lot of great lessons in your book, and I look forward to reading it for sure.
Thank you.
So, moving on, the next section of the podcast is where we talk about any possible objections or concerns that Christians might have about this particular movie. I think we've probably all seen Snow White, but are there any concerns that Christians might have in showing this to their kids or anything like that? So, the main thing that I can think of is obviously there is witchcraft being used in this movie, but it is by the evil queen.
Right. Absolutely.
It's certainly not being condoned as this is a character that you should emulate.
Yeah. That's one of those where, and over the years, I've heard people hold that objection to the fact that witchcraft is seen basically from the very first scene.
Mm-hmm.
The very first scene is the queen standing at the magic mirror.
Yeah.
So it is from the beginning. But it's all, you have to look at what Walt does with that story there. She uses the magic mirror. She brews potions. She transforms herself into a hag. She does all that, but he doesn't glorify it.
No.
And he doesn't normalize it. Instead, he uses it to sort of show evil in all its ugliness.
Mm-hmm.
And, her sorcery is tied to her vanity.
Yep.
It's about who's the fairest in the land. It's tied to her jealousy. It causes murderous intent. I mean, it is, her dark magic that she uses is more of a tool of destruction than it's anything aspirational.
Absolutely.
That, if I do this, then if I use this, or if I go down this path, then beautiful and magical and wonderful things happen. No. I mean, by the time she transforms herself into the old hag, everybody knows, well, this is just wrong.
Right.
I mean, Walt portrays it in such a way. He has his animators tell that story in such a way that that magic doesn't lead to happiness or fulfillment. It leads to her destruction as she's trying to use the lever to pry the rock to roll down the hill and ends up falling to her death. I mean, it is going off a cliff, struck by lightning, buzzard swooping down. I mean,
yeah.
So, it's sort of like the Romans, the wages of sin are death, that we remember from Scripture. The queen's witchcraft doesn't save her, doesn't preserve her beauty. Instead, it condemns her and it destroys her.
Yeah. I don't think that anybody watches Snow White and comes away saying, I want to be like the evil queen.
No.
If they do, they came into the movie with more serious problems. The movie did not cause those problems.
I think so. They really already needed to talk to someone.
Yeah. So the other objection, and this is not necessarily a Christian objection, but you certainly see people nowadays from maybe a more feminist perspective complaining about Snow White herself, that they see her as being weak and passive and lacking agency. She falls in love with the first man she meets. She's just a damsel in distress. What do you think of that?
Well, I always think of Snow White not as weak. I think of Snow White as innocent.
Yes.
And there's a difference there between those two. And really, yes, if you compare her to today, her role can feel very passive by today's standards. I mean, she cleans, she waits to be rescued, all those kind of things. But think about the fact that she actually demonstrates resilience in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when the huntsman tells her to run, she doesn't collapse in despair. She doesn't say that that's not something she can do or that she's too scared to go by herself into the woods. No, she heads off into the forest and she survives what would have been, you think about it in real terms, it would have been a terrifying journey for her through the forest. And she gets to work when she gets through the forest. She finds shelter. She organizes a household of 7 strangers. She takes charge.
Yeah.
She doesn't really care that it's not her house, and she doesn't care that there are objections. Think about Grumpy. He's a little grumpy about her stepping in. She also creates community.
Yeah.
She brings joy and order out of chaos. It's not weakness. It's, in a way, a very quiet strength. It doesn't demand attention, but instead, she quietly changes her environment and she makes it better.
Yeah.
And yeah, she does sort of fall in love with the first person that she meets. I mean, she's dressed in rags when she first encounters him. He probably thinks of her as a servant when she first sees him. And it appears that in her life, she's been isolated. And she's been a bit dehumanized, just as being treated as someone who is a servant without consideration for her thoughts or feelings. But here's somebody, when she encounters him, he sees past her circumstances. He values her for her. And maybe it's recognition that she appreciates there. The prince sees her gentle grace instead of just her dirty rags or her status in life. And, I guess like in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel, it says, man looks on outward appearance, the Lord looks at the heart. And maybe it's the prince that looks at the heart. And then we think about that, which is we could go New Testament then with the Son, and the Son looks at our heart, not our outward appearance, and sees great value there instead of the rags that we might be wearing, sees what we could be. And I think for me, it's really touching when she sings, I'm wishing for the one I love to find me today. I mean, in a way, that's faith. It's hope. And I think there's a power to that in a world that tells us just to go get what we want and never wait for anyone. Snow White reminds us that sometimes hopeful waiting is its own kind of strength.
Yes.
I mean, at Old Testament again, those that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. And so sometimes there is a power in the waiting.
Yeah, I love that. Last year, I read a book by Faith Moore, and it's called Saving Cinderella, What Feminists Get Wrong About Disney Princesses and How to Set It Right. And she talks about each of the princesses in turn. And she very much agrees with what you said about Snow White. And she pretty much changed my mind about Snow White because, I always kind of thought of her as a damsel in distress too.
Yeah.
But she makes the point that if we're looking at Snow White as a real person, she's very industrious. She's brave. She has a very positive attitude, even when things are very dark. She says she longs for a better life, but doesn't let her difficult situation break her. And at the end of the chapter, she said, she's strong, brave, resourceful, and true. She depicts in a way that children can process and begin to comprehend the transition to adulthood. She demonstrates how to stay strong and true to yourself, even in the most adverse circumstances. So, yeah, everything that you said about her. But then Faith's other point in this book is that ultimately princesses, and maybe especially Snow White, in fairy tales, they are not really real people. They are symbols. They are metaphors.
Right.
Snow White represents this pure, innocent woman. And the prince represents the man that is the perfect match for her. It's not that he's the first man that she's ever met and she just goes for him. It's that he is the man because he is the prince and she is the princess. They go together.
Right.
So I think you can look at Snow White as a real person and see lots of great qualities about her. And we'll talk more about that in the rest of the episode. You can also look at her and look at the whole story as being symbolic and a fairy tale. And Faith's argument throughout the book is that fairy tales and princesses it's always a story about girls transitioning into being women and the process of growing up and the struggle of growing up and all of that. So recommend that book too.
Excellent.
Yeah, she makes a lot of great points in there and definitely made me see Snow White in a new light after I read it. Can you think of anything else that Christians might object to about this movie?
Yeah, a lot of people have the objection to the magic of the true love's kiss can be something that, people may object to, but I think of it as that the kiss represents sacrificial love, breaking the power of death.
Yeah.
And I choose to tie it to the picture of what Christ does for us. The prince doesn't earn Snow White. he restores her through an act of love,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of what we see in the gospel. And there's an absence in the movie of explicit faith. Though Snow White is somewhat kept in a chapel-esque setting and they keep vigil at the glass and gold coffin, Snow White never prays or references God. And
There is a scene where she prays, actually.
there is. And so there is that one scene, but really there's not a lot in most of Disney's films.
No.
Walt, if you watched his life and study his life, his faith is lived out in so many ways in what he does. And he would mention his faith and he would talk about his deep belief in prayer and things like that when he would give interviews specifically around those topics. But his main thing was he lived out the James passage and he chose to be a doer and not just a hearer or not just a speaker. Is one of the things he said at one point, that it was being able to live out your faith that was instilled in him from very early on. I mean, his father and mother were very active in the Congregational church, and he was raised with that in his life. But Walt's life and Disney in the Disney movies and at Disneyland, you knew there were values, ethics, and there was faith around you. Walt just never did it in a blatant way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you have in Snow White. It's not a blatant way, but his values are represented in good always triumphs over evil. The light will always shine through the darkness. Love will triumph over hate. Humility will triumph over pride. In a way, all the movies that he was part of, they're thoroughly biblical, even though they're not explicitly biblical.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is there, even though it's not talked about in great ways.
Yeah. And we can absolutely, as creative people, create works that reflect the truth without being explicitly biblical, like you said.
Yeah.
And still shine a light through what we do.
Yeah, it's like the quote that's been attributed to St. Francis of Assisi for years, which is, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of power to that, because over the years, there's a lot of people that have been burned by people who can speak it, but they don't embody it.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to do both, or people to be able to see it and feel it in what you do and who you are, there's a richness and a power to that.
Yeah, I agree. The next section of the podcast is where we pick out a theme Bible verse or theme Bible verses that we think fit this particular movie. So I had a couple of thoughts, but I'm going to go with Titus 2:11 through 13. So let me read that. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. So the main part there that I latched onto was that waiting for our blessed hope, because again, that is one of Snow White's strengths, I think, is waiting for that hope of her prince. And, we'll talk more about what the prince could represent as we get into the movie, but I do think that he is a Christ figure for Snow White for sure, as she's waiting for that hope to rescue her, redeem her,
Right.
take her to the life that she belongs in rather than this life in rags. So did you have any Bible verses that this brought to mind?
Yeah, I went very sort of on the nose with it, with Isaiah 1:18. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow.
Yeah.
Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. It's symbolized in her name, Snow White,
Yeah.
white as snow, but also the redemptive nature of the story itself. You get Snow White, she represents purity, she represents innocence, but she's dressed in filthy rags at the beginning of the movie, so the sin nature. Her inner grace really can't be hidden. It's there. And the prince sees her true worth, and through his love restores her to who she, as you said, who she really is supposed to be. And for me, that is the picture of what Christ does for us. He sees past our sin-stained condition and he loves us anyway. And ultimately, he raises us spiritually from death to life.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point to transition into talking about the movie itself. I feel like we've covered a lot of our points already. So I like that the movie opens with a note from Walt just thanking his artists for the work that they did. I think that really goes back to what you said about him being a great example of leadership.
Yeah, he really did. He appreciated his artists on this because he knows he worked them harder than he had ever asked them to work. I mean, they had never drawn live looking figures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're animating a mouse, or before that, you're animating Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, you're not drawing human features and human movement. And so he asked them to expand their ability from a pure animator into an artist, a true artist. And he would bring in models for them to draw. He would bring in people to walk for them so they would see how things would move. They would have to make the outfits, the costumes that would be drawn on the characters. They would have to make them in real life so that the animators could see how would this flow when Snow White walks. And when she sits down, what happens to the dress? Because we never have seen that. We've never drawn that before. And so it was really a lot. And so I think it's an acknowledgement. Yes, it's going to be a Walt Disney film, but he wanted to make sure that people knew that it was not all Walt Disney. I mean, matter of fact, Walt didn't draw anything after the 1920s.
Yeah.
He stopped drawing because he realized his animation skills were very limited. His storytelling skills were unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And so he moved into storytelling and let the people who had the deeper and truer talents, people like Ub Iwerks and so many others, he let them do the drawing.
Yeah, his 9 old men and everyone else at the studio.
Yeah.
And I love in these old movies, not just Disney, but other old movies, the credits come first instead of at the end. So the people who made this are getting their credit right up front. You can't miss it.
You can't miss it. You're not walking out while they're rolling.
Yeah. And granted, there's a lot more people working on movies nowadays, so it makes sense that they put them at the end. But it is nice to see the animators get their due and the other people who worked on the movie get their due. And they really did put their all into this film. You know, you can compare it to things today and say, well, it looks old fashioned or the people move a little funny or whatever, but it's still beautiful.
It is.
It's still so impressive to look at, and especially, like, I love looking at the background details, especially, like, in the dwarf's cottage.
Right.
Like, all the wood carvings and the owl faces on the ends of the steps and every little detail. They didn't have to make it look that good. I'm sure Walt made sure that they did, but the level of attention to detail and just effort that they put into this is, you know, there's a reason that it's still considered a masterpiece today by everyone.
True. Very true.
So we start with the book opening, what would become a famous way for fairy tale movies to start. And we actually meet the queen before we meet Snow White, which is kind of an interesting way to start the movie. And like you said, right from the get-go, we're having that dark magic. I had forgotten about like the mirror bursting into flame kind of at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's intimidating.
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, from the very first, she comes out and she is beautiful, yes, and she's powerful, and she's very much in control.
Yeah.
She has the throne. She's got the magic mirror. She has all the authority. But you also sort of pick up immediately that she is consumed with one thing, herself.
Yeah.
You know, who is the fairest in the land? I mean, she is consumed with herself.
Absolutely.
She's not winning friends. It's not like someone where you watch a movie and you fall in love with a character, and then at some point the character, you realize, uh-oh, there's another side to them. No, not this character. The book opens and we meet the queen and everybody goes, okay, that's the bad person.
Yeah.
We have found the villain of the film already.
Yeah. So she's described as being vain and wicked and full of cruel jealousy. She obviously, like you said, only loves herself. I feel like she is a very Satan-like figure. I thought of Ezekiel 28. Verse 12, it says, "You were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty." And then down to 17, "Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings to feast their eyes on you." And all theologians can argue about whether that's about Satan or about whatever. But, but I think a lot of people interpret that to be about Satan.
Right.
Because they talk about him being in the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a pretty good description of the evil queen. She's been corrupted by her own beauty, by her love of her beauty.
Yeah.
And she also, to me, embodies a lot of what Paul calls the works of the flesh. Galatians 5, starting in verse 19. "Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God." Not all of those things are in this children's movie, thankfully.
Fortunately.
But we definitely see sorcery, you could argue idolatry. She's worshiping herself.
Yeah, she worships her own image.
Yeah.
Yeah, dark magic with sorcery and hatred
Yeah.
towards Snow White and jealousy. I mean, that's sort of the heart and the plot of everything is her jealousy and envious about Snow White's beauty, and ultimately murder.
Yeah.
It leads down to murder, or at least attempted murder.
Yeah, she tries her best.
She does. And you've got the idea of the poisoned apple,
Mm-hmm.
which ties back to the Garden of Eden, kind of echoing there, the forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
The idea, and she disguises herself,
Mm-hmm.
where in 2 Corinthians, you get Paul saying that Satan masquerades as an angel of light.
Mm-hmm.
And so she comes and masquerades as this harmless old woman, just offering a gift.
Mm-hmm.
But that gift that she offers is death.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So yeah, you get that idea as well. I mean, it ties back to even the beginning of evil in our world in the garden.
Yeah, and so then you get Snow White. We're introduced to Snow White, and she is in many ways an Eve-like figure. She's innocent and pure. Like you said before, her name, Snow White, makes you think of that verse in Isaiah about being whiter than snow. And so there's definitely a symbolism of purity to her. And just as the evil queen kind of embodies those works of the flesh, I feel like Snow White really demonstrates all of the traits of the fruit of the Spirit in the next few verses in Galatians, starting in verse 22. "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." So we could go through the movie and find moments where Snow White represents each of those traits.
Oh, yeah. Well, when people think about the movie, one of the first things that come to mind are either with a smile and a song that she has or whistle while you work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, both of those are joy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can easily find the fruits of the Spirit throughout the movie. Mostly in Snow White, but even occasionally in one of the dwarfs.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, gentleness. Think about how she treats the animals that she comes in contact with and how she treats the dwarfs. And, and her thing is, I'm going to make Grumpy like me. I mean, she really wants to make that connection. And even when she meets the old hag, the queen disguised, she's gentle to her and kind.
Yeah.
And now the animals know what she's up against, but she's very gentle. She's very kind.
To a fault.
Yeah.
But as we talked about, the queen has her dressed in these filthy rags, and that kind of calls to mind again that verse from Isaiah about all your righteousness is as filthy rags.
Yeah.
And she's been forced to work like a servant to try to hide her beauty because, again, of the queen's jealousy. But as the magic mirror tells the queen, rags cannot hide her gentle grace.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the world can try to dress us in shame and guilt and unworthiness, but it cannot extinguish what God's placed within us. The rags are not going to hide the grace that's inside. Our true identity is made in the image of God.
Yes. So we see her working as a scullery maid outside, scrubbing the steps. I thought it was interesting that she's surrounded by doves,
Yeah.
symbols of peace, symbols of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also, she sings to the wishing well. And it made me think about how many scenes we have in the Bible of women at wells.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How significant those always are.
Yeah.
Rebecca, Rachel, Zipporah, they all met their future husbands, or a servant who was representing their husband met them at the well. Hagar encountered the angel of the Lord at the well and called him the God who sees me. I think she's the first person in the Bible to give God a special name.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, thousands of years later, we had the Samaritan woman who encountered God as Jesus at the well, and he asked her for a drink of water. So again, interesting, like the symbolism that we see in this movie that could be seen as biblical symbolism, but obviously they're not trying to beat you over the head with it.
Right. Yeah.
And like you said, she sings, "I'm wishing for the one I love to find me today." And we could absolutely see that as the one I love.
Mm-hmm.
Being a symbol for God.
Yeah. Biblically, a lot of women have their lives changed at a well.
Mm-hmm.
And here's Snow White doing the same thing, surrounded by doves.
Yeah. And then the prince meets her there at the well. And again, I'm going to argue that the prince is a symbol for Christ.
Yes.
He comes right as she's singing this wish, which we could say is a type of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes riding a white horse.
All right.
As you've said, he sees past her filthy rags. He loves her anyway, just as Christ loves us in spite of our sins and died for us in spite of our sins. And at first, Snow White runs away in kind of fear and embarrassment. She recognizes that her rags are not the most flattering.
Yeah, which is exactly what we do, which is the moment with Peter in the boat with Jesus when, go away from me.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I'm sinful and Jesus calls him. And yeah, we all have those moments where we run away.
Yeah.
That's normally the first thing we do.
Mm.
That's not the last thing.
Yeah. And thankfully, it's not just on us. The prince pursues her lovingly, just like God pursues us.
Right.
So it's a beautiful little scene. And again, does she fall in love with the first man she meets? I probably would too. He's pretty charming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's somebody that sees you for who you are and not for what you're wearing and all of that. Somebody who actually sees your heart and knows what's inside and loves you for that. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think most people fall in love with that.
Sings to you. So the queen has been told by the mirror that Snow White is now the fairest in the land. She is jealous and she orders the huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. And she wants her to bring back her heart, which is interesting because obviously her heart is a symbol of her love, which is really where her beauty lies.
Mm-hmm.
She is physically beautiful, but again, that's a fairy tale symbol for her having a beautiful heart.
Yeah, she literally wants to destroy love itself and bring it back in a box with a heart with a dagger. It's very direct in many ways there.
Yeah. And Snow White, again, she is very innocent. She does not suspect any danger until all of a sudden the huntsman is standing over her holding his dagger. But thankfully, he is swayed by her innocence and her beauty and says, "I can't do it. Forgive me." And he tells her to run away. And in some ways, she kind of loses some of her innocence there because all of a sudden the world is a much darker, scarier place. And that's symbolized by her running into the forest and all of a sudden seeing these grasping hands with the trees and these evil faces everywhere and being so frightened of everything. She's seen that there is evil in the world. I mean, she probably already knew that to some extent with her stepmother being not a very nice person.
Right.
But she never suspected that she was in danger of her life from her. And now she knows that actually she is.
And she may have always thought that the evil was contained in one, or she may have looked and hoped for something better out of her stepmother. And we get to this point in the story where suddenly innocence is threatened because she realizes that there are dangers out there.
Yeah.
And she's never encountered those before.
Yeah. So she runs through the forest and is getting kind of hysterical, but then finally sees that two of the scary eyes that she saw were actually these gentle animals and they come and surround her. And she she calms down and she's like you said, she's resilient. We all have moments of fear, but
Hmm.
to come out of that. And she actually says, I'm so ashamed of the fuss I made, which when your life was just threatened, it's okay.
Yeah. Her response was a little disproportionate, she feels, to the actual threat. I mean, the little innocent woodland creatures were not the threat she thought they were.
Yeah.
But think about how many times in our life where our reaction is disproportionate to what's really the threat
Hmm.
that's out there. We can tend to overreact to it. And we probably ought to be ready to break into song and talk about how ashamed we are of the fuss we made.
Yeah. And so she then sings with a smile and a song, and she says everything's going to be all right. So she's an optimist.
She is.
Even though her life was just threatened and she doesn't have a home anymore, she has faith that it's all going to be well in the end, and that everything's going to turn out all right. So the animals bring her to a cottage in the woods, and it's lived in, it's very messy, no one is home. And based on the size of everything, she assumes that it's a bunch of children living alone in the woods. So she kind of decides that she's going to be their mother.
Right.
I mean, she's really taking initiative here because she says, maybe if I clean this place up, they will let me stay. So she's trying to make herself useful. She's trying to earn her keep. She's not just being a weak woman who has to clean things.
No, no. She's trying to make her way in the world because she thinks that this is the rest of her life. And so she's trying to make a life.
Right. And these are the skills she has. She has been treated as a maid by her stepmother all of her life. So she knows how to clean.
Yeah.
I will say, I would love it if I had some friendly forest animals to help me clean.
Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, just open the door and they come running in, clean your house with you, and then they leave. I mean, it'd be excellent.
Yeah. But we could also say that this is, again, a result of her embodying those fruit of the spirit, her kindness and gentleness to the animals. Even before her life was in danger, she was helping the little baby bird try to find its parents.
Right.
So it's not just, I'm being nice to these animals because I need their help. She is just a kind person
Yeah.
and a gentle person.
Genuinely who she is.
Yeah, and that is why the animals want to help her. And that is why she wants to help these children, as she thinks they are, to clean their house too.
Hmm.
It's transactional, but it is also kindness because she doesn't want to see children living in these conditions.
Right.
So she sings Whistle While You Work, which again is her optimism and joy, like you said. It's her making the best of a bad situation. But also called to mind for me that in the Garden of Eden before sin, work was still a part of God's plan for us.
Hmm.
Work was a good thing.
It was a good thing. Yeah.
So it's kind of a picture of that work can be joyful, and it was originally intended to be.
Well, yeah, even the Seven Dwarfs singing "Hi Ho, Hi Ho."
Yeah.
I mean, they're joyous going to work and they're joyous coming home from work. I mean, they enjoy what they do.
I do wonder what they're doing with all of those gems that they're
You
harvesting.
really have to wonder that, and maybe they're investing the money. They're not really spending it on luxury accommodations or anything like that, or hiring staff to take care of them. So, yeah, you got to wonder what they do with all the gems from the mines.
Well, they're not keeping them that secure either because Dopey just hangs up the key right next to the door where they put all of the gems in. So
True.
And obviously, this is a fairy tale that existed long before Disney, and it's been seven dwarfs for who knows how long.
Right.
But it is interesting that the number is seven because that is always a significant number in the Bible.
Hmm.
So when they come home, they at first think that Snow White is a monster. And like you said, that kind of pictures us letting our fears go out of control.
Right.
They're nervous, they're afraid, and so they see her as a monster. But then when they actually see her, their perception changes 100%. And I think one of them says she looks like an angel.
Yeah.
And as I was watching it this time around, I thought, well, I think the prince is a Christ figure for Snow White. I think Snow White herself is arguably a Christ figure for the dwarfs.
Hmm.
Or at least she's a figure pointing them toward Christ, which is obviously what all of us should be as Christians.
Right.
Christian means little Christ. We should be embodying Christ for the world. But she knows them all by name, just like God knows us all by name. She's able to say, oh, you must be grumpy and you must be happy. And I thought it was interesting that she says, supper's not quite ready. You'll just have time to wash.
Hmm.
And they also show her their hands, and their hands are filthy. I just thought of the Lord's Supper
Yeah.
and needing to cleanse ourselves, needing to be cleansed.
Yeah, doing the prayer of confession before you go and receive Holy Communion is always a powerful thing because though our sins be as scarlet, they can be snow white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she tells them to go and wash. And I do love that she is convinced that she's going to make Grumpy love her, that Grumpy's going to be her friend.
Yeah.
But she doesn't try to coerce him necessarily. She doesn't do anything like that. She just keeps being herself.
Yeah, she's not pushy.
No, she just keeps being herself. And I think there's as far as evangelism goes, there's a great example there. I mean, you go out and if you are yourself as a Christian, as a disciple, a Christ follower, and you live that way fully in front of someone, you just keep being yourself. Eventually, you've got a really good chance that they're going to see what you are, who you are, and why you are.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to force them into it, then you're probably not going to win that argument.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that we see her praying about later on is, please let Grumpy like me.
Yes.
So it's also, we cannot force people to be saved or we cannot force people to like us. Ultimately, that is God's job.
Right.
But we do have our part to do, as you said.
Yeah. We sow the seed,
Mm-hmm.
or like Paul said, one plants, one waters, but the harvest is up to God.
Yeah, God gives the increase.
Yes.
So yeah, like you said, the other dwarfs are happy to go along with whatever Snow White wants. They are bought in.
They are.
They say, I'll take a chance for her, even though this washing thing seems scary. They are willing to do it. But Grumpy very much resists being changed by her. He mocks the other dwarfs. He kind of stands off in the corner and crosses his arms.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, when they're having their little dance and their party and everything, and again, like you said, she's brought joy and community to this cottage. And they ask her to tell them a true story, a love story. And so she tells them about falling in love with the prince and says, it was easy to do. He was the only one for me, and there's no one like him anywhere at all. And again, to me, that shows that the prince can definitely be argued to be a symbol for Christ.
Yeah.
He's the only one for us. There is only one way. There is only one savior.
Right.
No one like him anywhere at all. He is unique. She sings, someday my prince will come. Someday we'll meet again, and away to his castle we'll go to be happy forever, I know. So again, that is that hope that Christ is coming again for us to take us to our home.
Right.
And then meanwhile, we find out the queen has found out that the heart that she was given is the heart of a pig, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is interesting as a fairy tale symbol that they have an animal being sacrificed.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have that all throughout the Bible, especially the Old Testament.
Yes. The sacrificial system of the Jewish faith in the Old Testament and the sacrifice being made for us. So yeah, the pig's heart is an interesting gift back to the queen.
Mm-hmm. And then ironically, in her obsession with her beauty and with being the fairest and wanting to kill Snow White so badly in order to be the fairest, she ends up making herself look old and ugly with this spell that transforms her into the old hag.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting picture of what sin does to us and how it twists us.
Yeah, we think that it's benefiting. We think it's taking us where we want to be, but ultimately it does not. It takes us where we don't want to be.
Yeah.
As the old hag, she is absolutely everything she fought against.
Yeah, it takes her further down the path that she was trying not to be.
Right.
So in the morning, we find out that Snow White's prayer for Grumpy to like her has, I think, been answered. She starts to win his affection.
Mm-hmm.
He still tries to hide it and act tough, but he is happy to be kissed just like all of the other dwarfs. Kiss goodbye, and he is then protective of her and warns her to watch out for the queen and not fall for any of her tricks. But then the queen, as the old hag, shows up with her poison apple in order to tempt Snow White, much like Satan tempting Eve in the garden. And Snow White, as much as she is a symbol of purity and innocence, she is not perfect because she does succumb to this temptation just like Eve does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that the queen tells her it's a magic wishing apple. One bite and all your dreams will come true. So that reminds me again of all the promises that the serpent made to Eve in the garden of, if you eat this fruit, you're going to have your eyes open and you're going to be like God. You're going to know good and evil.
Yeah, things are going to be so much better, and you're going to get everything you wanted, and everything you didn't even know you wanted, you're going to get if you eat the apple. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, as patient as Snow White has been about waiting for her prince to come, now she gives into the temptation to try to make her wishes come true herself rather than continuing to wait patiently.
Yeah.
And her desire to be with the prince is a good desire, but she, at this point, decides to go about trying to fulfill that desire in the wrong way, which is something that we can all fall into.
We do.
So the dwarfs come to Snow White's rescue, but they're too late.
It's too late.
They pursue after the evil queen. And like you said, she's trying to roll this boulder over onto them, and a bolt of lightning comes from the sky. So you have like that very much a symbol of divine justice and judgment.
Yeah. And even a revelation-y kind of moment when you read Revelation and you read about the beast will be thrown into the pit, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You have her falling into the pit, falling off the cliff, down, 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 and then the buzzards circling their way down after her.
Yeah, that scene with the vultures, it always gets me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just, there's poetry in this movie.
Mm-hmm. There is.
So the dwarves, instead of burying Snow White like the queen thought they would, because as the queen revealed earlier, she's not actually dead, she's just sleeping.
You're right.
I can't remember what she calls it, the sleep of death or something.
Right.
She looks dead, and she assumed that the dwarves would bury her and then she would really be dead. But instead, they put her in this glass coffin, and then we see the dwarves and the animals mourning for her, maybe even praying. They're, kind of bowing their
head down, yeah.
And then, voila, the prince appears.
And remember, in that moment, you also have Grumpy with tears flowing down his face.
Yeah.
So it's a touching moment there with Grumpy.
Yeah, the emotion is great, and you feel their hopelessness.
Yeah.
But hope is just around the corner. And so the prince kisses Snow White, and we talked about the controversy or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This non-consensual kiss. Once again, this is a fairy tale.
It is.
No one's saying that you should just walk up and kiss a sleeping girl.
No.
But in this case, this is waking this sleeping girl from a virtual death. So
right. Absolutely.
I think we can excuse it. And then her eyes flutter open. The prince sweeps her into his arms. Everyone begins celebrating. The transition from the scene of mourning to the scene of joy is so dramatic and beautiful. It made me think of Psalm 30, verse 11. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing.
Mm.
You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness. So we see they're dancing.
Yeah.
Their mourning is dramatically turned into dancing. And what a beautiful picture that is. The prince puts her up onto his white horse. She kisses each of the dwarfs goodbye, and he leads her off toward what looks like a golden castle in the sky surrounded by beams of light. And it is hard not to see heavenly symbolism there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have the prince as the Christ figure. You have a person who is, the sleep of death.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the prince is the one who raises her up where, we're told that we will be raised. And then off to the castle they go. So the image of either the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven in Revelation 21, or you get John 14, and I've prepared the place for you, and I'll come and take you to myself so that where I am, there you'll be also.
Mm.
So you get that imagery where he has the place ready for her now, and he's taking her there. Yeah, it is really powerful. And the biblical and spiritual imagery that's in this story.
Yeah. It's hard to deny at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just a beautiful ending. And then we get the words, of course, that we get at the end of most fairy tales anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived happily
ever after.
And that is ultimately the end of our story.
That's our goal.
As Christians, we know that our prince will come and we will have that ending as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking back after watching the whole movie, I thought about some lessons and ideas that came to me were evil schemes cannot overcome God's plans.
Mm.
Snow White and the prince were intended to be together. whatever the evil queen plotted against her just got wiped out.
Yeah. And the idea that whatever filthy rags we may have on or that the world tells us or that we feel that we're wearing, Christ sees through the filthy rags and sees who we are inside and our potential and that we are made in his image. Snow White was in rags when the prince first saw her, but he saw her as more than just a person in rags. And that I think that's a good lesson for us, how Christ sees us.
Yeah. I thought of John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. So we could see that as being the evil queen's part. She wants to kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, in that battle, God always wins.
Right.
He brings resurrection. He brings redemption. He brings victory over death. He breaks sin's curse and wakes us up to new life with him.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful movie. It's also possibly a beautiful allegory.
Yes, I really do think it is. Some people argue that when the Grimm brothers took the story that had been told for years and years and they wrote it down, that they intentionally wanted the story to hold some Christian imagery within it. And then Walt, of course, we can tell Walt takes it and as he adapts it into the first full-length animated movie, he seems to add more, build more into it, and really draw out those parallels in clearer ways.
Yeah.
So he meant for it to tell a story, not just a story, but to tell the story is what you can sense. And I love that, we start off talking about his desire for it to be the first full-length animated movie and all. But in 1937, when they finished it and they went to the Carthay Theater for its grand night of premiere, the theater was packed with movie moguls and celebrities, all these people there to watch this because they were as interested as anybody was as to what would a full-length animated movie be like.
Yeah.
But they tell the story that Walt barely sat down in the movie theater. He and Lillian were on the in the front, and that he kept turning and getting up from his seat a little bit just to look around behind him, trying to see what were they feeling, what were they thinking. And then he started to hear they were laughing when they were supposed to. It's all adults in the theater, but they were laughing when he wanted them to laugh. And they were shocked, and you could hear the gasp when he wanted the gasp. And then when Snow White's placed in the glass and gold coffin, and the dwarves are crying and the animals are bowing. And in the silence of the theater, he could hear adults crying. And he knew that this message, that this medium was a medium that he could build off of, but also that the message, the story was powerful enough that it could touch the hearts of even movie moguls and celebrities, that it had that power. And so I think that he knew that the story had that power, that it was able to reach them with that message of love and the message of good over evil. And that was what he wanted them to take away. And it was hitting home. And he was excited that that worked.
Yeah. So, Bill, remind us again, where can we find you online or where can we buy your book when it comes out?
Yeah, I can be found online through deeperpurposecoaching.com. You can also find me through my church's website, which is V as in Victor, VHMC.org. The book, Faith, Leadership, and Walt, will be out in early part of March of 2026. And so I hope folks will look for it on Amazon and other online booksellers. It comes out in partnership with Maxwell Publishing. If you find me on Amazon, you'll also find other books that I've written. There is More, which is about moving away from cultural Christianity to living a life as a faithful disciple of Jesus. So there is more than just blending into the world around us. The Silent Years is there, which deals with how God is working, even when we don't know that God is working. That just like there's this undercurrent of faith in these stories that Walt tells, there's an undercurrent of what God is doing, even when we're not paying attention. And so the Silent Years deals with how God works in the silence of the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And there's study guides and all that along with that one. And then there's one just to help us grasp the power of the week. It's a book called 8 Days That Changed Forever. And it is a retelling, a combination of all four gospel accounts telling the story from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday.
Wow, great. I will definitely link to your author page on our show notes so that people can check out all of those books.
Wonderful.
So, Bill, thank you again. It's been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
I did. Absolutely. This has been a great way to spend some time.
So before I wrap up this episode, I wanted to do a little bit of business. As some of you may know, I moved to a new hosting platform for my podcast a few months ago, and I think it's been a change for the better in most ways. But this new hosting platform does offer the opportunity to have ads added to your podcast in order to monetize. And I have passed whatever bar for the number of listeners that they require in order to qualify for that program. So I could have ads added to the podcast. And I'll admit it is tempting because this podcast is a hobby that I do on my own. I don't get paid to do it as much as I would love to. And it does come with costs. For instance, hosting costs money. Sometimes equipment needs to be replaced. Marketing sometimes costs me money and time. But after looking into it, I have decided, at least for now, not to use their program to add commercials to the podcast. Partly because I hate commercials as much as everyone else, and I don't want to inflict that on you guys. But also because I wouldn't have total control over what commercials played. And while they do offer some control of being able to say what types of content you don't want, I still wouldn't have ultimately the final say in yes or no to a certain commercial, and I wouldn't be able to control that. So for now, I'm going to say no to that. But as an alternative, what I would be open to is if there's anyone out there who has a small business that they would like to promote through my podcast and would like to sponsor an episode or multiple episodes, I would certainly be open to discussing that. And I'm not talking about, a huge amount of money to sponsor an episode either, because I still have a relatively small listenership. But if you have a business that you feel like would be compatible with my audience, either something related to animation, something related to art, something related to Christianity, for instance, if you have an Etsy shop that you'd like to promote or anything like that, I would certainly be open to discussing that with you, discussing what would be a fair rate for promotion. And then we could work together for me to read a promotion of your business within the episode that would not be too disruptive to listeners, but would also help to promote your business. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to me at toonmyheartpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, if you don't have a business to promote, but you do want to support the podcast monetarily, even a small amount is always just a help and an encouragement. I do have a Buy Me a Coffee page, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes. So that's a secure site where you can make a donation to the show, and it can be a one-time donation. It can be an ongoing thing. I appreciate anyone and everyone who has ever contributed monetarily to the show, but I also just so appreciate you for just listening to the show, because every listener that I get is an encouragement to me to keep going, that there are people out there that are listening and enjoying this and hopefully getting something out of it. With that, I want to say thank you again to my guest today, Dr. William Brunson. It was a really enjoyable conversation with him, and I definitely encourage you to check out his book, which is out now on Amazon and other retailers. So I will definitely include a link to his Amazon page in my show notes. Again, thank you for your support in any way. And if you haven't already done so, the easiest way to support the podcast is just to hit that like or follow button, hit the subscribe button, make sure that you're notified about future episodes. And also that helps the algorithm know that this is a show that people are interested in, and it will hopefully show it to other people who might be interested in it. I would love if you would write a review or give a rating of 5 stars. And of course, I am always happy to hear your feedback. Feel free to reach out to me on social media. I am at Toon My Heart on X, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also reach me by email, as I said earlier, toonmyheartpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, don't forget, that's always TOON as in cartoon. Thank you again for your time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Until next time, never stop believing that someday your prince will come.